How should a man live? Should that man not believe in consequences? Does that man stay within his moral boundary? Or does he perhaps go on a massive streak of murder and deception? Considering the situation William found himself in, he believed the latter. Crouched down in a forest with his back pressed against a tree as he heard the shouting of many voices and angry civilians as they chased him through the woods, he rolled to the side and ducked into the shadows of a tree, pressing his hands against the floor and melding into the shadows. Emerging from the darkness within a nearby pub which held the next man on his list. Before all of that, I should explain where he found himself after first being tossed into this world. 9 o'clock. That's what the giant clock tower said the first time he came to. He was floating in the air, a weightless sensation squirming through his body and radiating outwards. He looked at himself to find claws of dark green and black gas the size of people, in a large, draconic snout made of the same gas shooting out from where his point of vision was. He was slowly managed to get a grip on and grab a nearby wall, digging his claws into it to propel himself forward and upwards. He remained effortlessly weightless as he floated in the air. He recognized the vague outline of the demon god character that he had made when he was first invited to join the beta test in his gaseous form, but it was too cloudy to make out. He continued upward, eventually digging his claws into the roofs and ceilings to jump forward and make his way up to the clock tower. Upon reaching the clock tower, he slowly dug his claws into the side, and with a massive pull, he flew forward, the air rushing against his gaseous form. He felt it against his face. It was not unlike floating in the void of space without a spacesuit. Every inch of his body felt cold. Very cold. He shivered slightly as he made the next leap, reaching the face of the clock before grabbing the hand of it and turning around to look down upon the place in which he had ended up. Bronze buildings with pipes spitting smoke and lit windows leading into mechanical monstrosities that, substituted for bedrooms, greeted his gaze. The moon shone down on the streets to reveal several civilians gazing up at him in awe and horror as he hung off the clock tower. William smirked, mumbling under his breath, "This is so cool." He noticed a slight opening that formed a window on the side of the tower before grabbing it and tossing himself into it, finding himself in a huge open cavity on the inside of the clock tower where the workings of the clock sat. He slowly crawled across the floor, looking for someone, for something, for a host. He heard a footstep behind him and quickly spun around to find a man in a deep blue robe with a blue face mask aiming a bow at him. "This place is mine. Get out," the figure demanded in a deep, rough voice. William raised his arms in submission, unsure what to do. "Shit, look, I'm not here to hurt you," William began, but the man tightened the string on his bow. "Like hell you aren't. I recognize your kind. Get out of here, demon, before I send you back to the demon world myself." This sent William's mind for a spin. The NPCs can hear me? He thought to himself. Then he got an idea. "Behind you!" he shouted. The figure spun around just as William wrapped a giant claw around him, throwing him to the side. "Cool," William muttered as he slowly crawled on top of the figure. He slowly took out one of his huge claws and pulled down the figure's mask, but the figure clenched his fist and propelled it forward at inhuman speeds. A gust of supernatural wind blew William out the window of the clock tower and sent him floating off to the side with nothing to grab onto as he slowly began to descend. What the hell was that? He asked himself, but ignoring it, he swam downwards in an attempt to speed up his descent. He eventually reached the point wherein he could once again move via propelling himself off of buildings and the like. He jumped from building to building until finding another open window. He slowly stuck one hand in, and then the other, propelling himself into the room. He examined his surroundings, finding a young man cooking in a kitchen with what had been a very old equipment, steam coming out of rusty pipes to air fry the food in the pan as he stirred something in a nearby pot. William leaped forward to grab the man's face, attempting to take over his body, but the man resisted heavily. He shoved William off and reached for a nearby revolver. "What the hell?" William heard the man scream, knowing it was time to scram. William ducked out of the window and went flying into the night once more. He knew by instinct that he needed to find a host before he could take on a physical form. He flew to a nearby shelter which seemed more makeshift and out of place. It seemed to be full of men and women in rugged clothes that looked like they hadn't bathed in God knows how long. He considered some of the more healthy-seeming ones, but knew pretty quickly that none of them would make good hosts. William moved on, then to another house, holding only 2 children that had been left behind by their parents, which were God knows where at this hour. He eventually made his way to a nearby beach where he found a small alcove which he sensed life from. He slowly entered the dark alcove before turning the corner in the brick-laden tunnel which he had found himself in and seeing a sleeping mermaid there in a blue top with several strands of beads hanging from her deep blue tail. William shrugged, not the biggest fan of mermaids, but knowing he had to settle with what he got. He grabbed the mermaid by the back of the head and tried to shove his giant gaseous hand down her throat. She slowly inhaled the gas until he was almost completely engraved into her when she began coughing and spit it back out, and a sixth sense went off in William's head like a million blaring lights. Iona? He asked aloud before another large gust of wind shot him out of the tunnel and back into the open air. Shrugging off the third odd encounter of the day, he listened closely and heard glass breaking nearby. He followed the sound, propelling sand and concrete behind him to traverse the land with his giant claws, eventually coming to a large tower with several mechanical arms and pipes running along the outside of it. It looked straight out of a steampunk film, some sort of lab if you had to guess, but Phantom could tell by the sounds that something was going on in there. He slowly climbed the tower. It was thick and made of bronze, so it was hard to get his claws through, but he managed it eventually after a few tries, propelling himself in the air with all his force. Eventually, he got to a window that had been shattered and slowly squeezed inside despite his huge gas cloud of a body. Shattered glass lay all over the floor, paper strewn everywhere as a man in a long white coat with white and black Victorian-style cape laid in a pool of blood. His gray hair was brushed back and blood was leaking from not only his mouth but the back of his head. William watched as the man coughed once, then twice, expelling more blood from his mouth with each cough as the floor became stained and red. William slowly slithered across the floor to the man and grabbed his face, pulling him to look at William. "Do you want to survive this?" William asked. The man nodded slowly and pointed at the door. "You have to save my daughter," he begged. "Let me in and I will," William told him as he slowly pried the man's throat as open as he could and slid inside, slowly entering the man and possessing him. The man's eyes flickered green as he felt the demonic energy flowing through his body. The body slowly faded as his wounds closed and he stood up, but it wasn't him. He was in the back seat. This time, William was driving. 4 men in black masks and robes were outside the room, trying to catch his daughter who was running back and forth around a table. She was fast, too fast. But eventually, one of them grabbed her right as the door to the room the girl's father was in fell over. All eyes turned towards him as he entered with his hands in his pockets. "What the fuck? I swear I killed that guy!" One of the men in black shouted, accidentally letting go of the girl and leaving her to go hide in a corner. "You've been hanging with that wizard too long. He turned you into a fucking pussy," another one of them shouted, drawing a revolver and pointing it at William. William quickly dived forward onto the man with the revolver and dug his fist into the man's face. "Take that, bitch!" William shouted, leaving everyone in the room, minus the man with his face half bashed in from William's punch, staring at him in disbelief. William quickly shot up and grabbed another man, slamming his head into the table and shoving him backwards, kicking him in the gut. The next one tried to pull out a dagger and stab him in the back, but William grabbed his wrist and deflected the blade back into the man's gut. William's eyes widened in surprise as the feats he could accomplish. Before he could take out the next one, though, a fireball appeared in the robed figure's hands as he casted some sort of spell. William found himself hit in the chest with a ball of pure fire. He felt the scorching spread as he got back, the pain rearing through his body as he curled up into a ball. "What the hell?" he screamed. "I can feel it! Why can I fucking feel it?" He shouted again, hoping someone would come get him out of this game, but no reply was heard. "It's fire, idiot," the man in the robe said. William watched as the man in the robe slowly grabbed the little girl and began marching out, dragging her along. He watched the man slam the door behind him, leaving his friends. Eventually, the one that was stabbed in the gut by his own dagger squirmed. William looked over, still toppled over in pain, as a faint green glow began to emanate from the man. The man took one last shaky breath before the glow faded and flew up, forming an orb in the air. William got on his knees and slowly moved up to the man, placing his fingers on his neck to check for a pulse and finding none. He slowly reached up and touched the orb, watching as the wound on his chest healed immediately.